Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. I'm your host, Pooja Kotari. I'm so happy to see you all today. I'm the founder of Boundless Awareness. We provide anti-oppression programming and curriculum and facilitate them. With me today is a guest that I am so happy to have today. I have been waiting a long time to talk to her. We have Ariane Hunter, author, speaker, work culture critic who has some gems to drop today. We're very lucky to be hearing from her. Ariane, please, I want to give it to you to introduce yourself and really flesh out what you do and all the good stuff that you provide.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pooja, first of all, for having me on. I have been also a big fan of yours for some time now. So it's really great to be in the hot seat, so to speak, and just to have this conversation with you. We were just kind of talking behind the scenes around like what's happening in the world. And
Yeah.
it's just so much that we have to deal with every single day, and in a lot of ways I'm very happy that we're having these conversations. We'll continue to have these conversations around social equity and injustice and keep fighting the good fight. And this is why I came into the ring over 10 years ago. I started out as a career coach, and I've worked with individuals and companies, and sort of really having the behind the scenes of what goes on, in our lives, in our work world, in our career world. And so what are some of the beliefs that we attach ourselves to when it comes to work culture, when it comes to hustle culture and climbing the corporate ladder, right? So I became very, very fascinated with our tendency to sort of, gravitate towards, pulling up our bootstraps and, checking off those career boxes and, really going for what they say you're supposed to have. And then having this rude awakening once, entering into corporate America and seeing the blatant injustice that's happening, and so it's at the time, I felt like a crazy person for bringing these things up, and just noting that there's something seriously wrong with our work culture and what happens within office culture, and especially as a Black woman, as a woman of color, the impact of what happens when we are exposed to such injustices, pay and transparency, and pay inequities, I should say. So I went into this work to really start to undo, what are those work culture norms that we have bought into? What are those systemic inequities that are impacting our lives and our families every single day? And really dig into that. And understand how we can start to undo that and live our lives with more joy and career liberation, as I like to call it.
Mhm.
So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's sort of the mission that I show up to every single day.
Yeah. I remember when we connected like 8, 9 years ago. And, I can't believe, like, it's been that long that we've known each other, but, how has, like, the career coaching changed? I mean, so much has changed and, like, discourse has changed. Societal awareness of inequities have like, skyrocketed, like, the social education, has around these topics has really grown. Um,
Absolutely.
what are the changes that you've seen from 8, 9, 10 years ago to today?
That's such a great question. In a lot of ways, I feel like these conversations have been happening just kind of behind the scenes, behind the surface. We haven't really talked about in a major way, the conversations that we're seeing every single day in terms of inequities in the workplace. But these are conversations that I had the privilege of having, with my clients, when it was like, I can't really talk to my manager about this, or I can't really
Yeah.
talk to who do I talk to about this, right? So I felt a lot of honor and privilege to be able to navigate, these questions, these conversations. Sometimes we don't always have the answer to them, but the fact that we're asking these questions, right, shows that something feels imbalanced, right? And so, how can we dig into that, and how can we start to peel back some of the layers of, being surrounded by a system that constantly wears at us, and constantly sort of pokes at our mental health and our well-being. I think what really shifted the needle a little bit is, during the pandemic, obviously that was
Yeah.
a huge, complete global upending, of how we lived, how we worked. The Black Lives Matter movement uprising that happened, healthcare crisis, the racial crisis that was happening. So, we all know that these are, things that have always been happening. It's just that it was opened up, at a time where we were all paying attention and listening because we were home and we were kind of
Yeah.
unable to leave the house. So I think that was around the time that, the conversation started to shift and we started to really become or started to really confront, some of these injustices that are happening and really unpack, what that means for us and how that they've been impacting us. So the things that I'm noticing more is, a sort of a, a rising up of, our health, our well-being, pushing back on, especially, work culture is my world and that's what I do, but it's understanding that, we want more out of our careers. And this is not meaning like get another credential or go to school or, although that's fine too.
Yeah.
But we really want to be, treated better at the very least, and really start to push back on hustle culture that is literally killing us. So, that's when, the great resignation was happening. Employees had, really that power to start to think about what is it that I value? What is it? What is important to me? Because what I've been doing and this boxes that I've been checking is certainly not it, right? So having that conversation and really going towards that direction, instead of doing the things that we've always been taught to do. So again, it's just
Yeah.
it's an exciting time to just have these conversations, and I really think that we are asking the right questions so that we can make better choices.
Yeah, I love that. I always tell my clients and participants, the more precise you are in your language and the more specific you are with the words you choose, the
Mm,
the better you'll be able to explain to somebody else, why this is offensive or biased or discriminatory, like be precise. And I love like if we can ask the right questions, we'll find the solutions.
exactly.
Um, One thing I'm wondering is how you all how you got started in all of this. Why are you interested in equity? Is there anything that like propels you in this way, or an experience, or an event, or your background? Like, why is it meaningful to you?
Yeah, I really have to shout out my dad for this. And I appreciate this question, because fighting for justice, being aware of, our access to opportunities, to resources came at a really, really early age for me. And I never really told this story publicly before. But when I was a kid, I have a brother, I have a older brother. He's about 5 years older than me. And I remember at the time he was, he was in elementary school and he was diagnosed with, a learning disability. And it was something that, they wanted to move him to a different class. And there was a whole, kind of thing around that. And, I remember my dad at the time becoming really enraged by that. And I couldn't understand why. It's like, oh, it's school, you have to just listen to what they say. And, but it
Mhm.
was one of the first times when I saw really, what my dad was fighting for, and especially as my brother, he was, just navigating life as a Black boy in America. Being underestimated, wasn't an option, and he really
Yeah.
wanted to protect him. So it taught me that, equality is not always a given. You really have to advocate for those who, may not be able to advocate for themselves. It really taught me to, see each other, especially as, my brother, my family, in our fullest potential, and to really advocate for that. So when you're labeled or when you're othered in some way, it really sets you up for more hardships and more difficulties, as you navigate life. So my dad knew this. He had the foresight to know that, once my brother is deemed, an other or labeled in some way, that will carry, with him. And so he really just wanted to fiercely protect that. So it really just sort of opened my eyes, to how this world works, at the young age that I was, and how we really have to rise up and fiercely protect those that we love and can care about, whether they're family, whether they're friends, we're all connected, right? But if someone is marginalized in some way or vulnerable in some way, it is our duty, to use our privilege and to fiercely protect and advocate for them. So
I'm just writing, like, there's so many things you're saying that I don't want to forget. You said,
yeah,
um, and I think this relates maybe to your definition of what equity is. How can we see the full potential in others and then get them the support to fulfill that potential?
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
all of us have a different potential, and
yes,
all of us have different needs to get to fulfill that potential. And
absolutely,
if you see things as like, oh, well, you're computing things a little differently, or you're thinking of things um, in a different manner, then like, okay, and I wonder what your full potential is. Let me wonder about that and be curious about it, and then think about how I can get you there. How, as a teacher, how do I help you like achieve your full
yes,
potential?
yes, yes, absolutely. We
That's
all
really such a
learn as
strong statement. I love that.
yeah, absolutely. It is that potential. It is some, and it's sad to think just the untapped potential, that goes unnoticed or goes unserved, because we're not seeing that person in their fullest self. So again, obviously it's really something that I'm passionate about and feel strongly about, but it is our duty to protect those.
Yeah, and like as a child or a student, you don't know what your full potential is. You're trying to see it reflected in your teachers and your parents and all other caregivers around you.
That's right.
And that informs what you think your own potential is.
Exactly, and that's how the beliefs start, about ourselves and what we can and what we can't do. What was that time when someone told you that you can't do something? What was that even based off of, right? So you carry
Right.
this with you, not really knowing that there's so much more to you, and if only you had the tools and the awareness, and the support.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We're so quick. We're so quick
Mhm.
to put a label and then drop it in the box and label this and drop it in that box. And
Right.
yeah, we don't
Right.
take the time in
Mhm.
our society. Um, okay, so when it comes to, I'm just dealing with this recently with a number of participants and clients of mine of what we're really focusing on is repairing harm. We
Mm.
talk a lot about that in workshops, and I'd love to hear your strategies for that step of repairing harm, which a lot of people think about as difficult conversations or, I'm anxious about this. Like, I don't know how it's going to go off. I mean, there's so much fear that I
Yeah.
see people bring
Yeah.
to just workshops where we're just practicing this stuff that, um, what is your, how would you advise?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen this so many times, and we continue to tiptoe around topics that may feel, like we don't want to get it wrong, or we don't want to offend, or we don't want to, appear like we don't know what we're talking about, and all of that is ego. All of it is ego. Put it aside. It's not about you, boo. Right? It's like really understanding that you are here to learn. Okay, it's not about a pressure to get it right. It's about what can we learn from each other. I like to approach uncomfortable conversations. First of all, I don't I don't like when there is a conversation that needs to be had that it's uncomfortable and we avoid it. This
Yeah.
I personally, it's just I'm not able to just go about, my normal day without having addressed this. And the longer you wait, sometimes, most times, it makes it especially more difficult than it needs to be, right? So addressing these conversations, in the moment, if you can, not letting it fester or wait, even beyond a day. I want to recognize that sometimes people move at different paces and different times, right? So it's understanding like what's your timeline, what do you need to center yourself and to ground yourself, in order to have the conversation. Taking that time that you need, but not too much time, right? So I always recommend at least the next 24 hours, right? Use that time to get centered. Use that time to really set your intention for the conversation or for the experience. What is it that you're here to learn? What is it that you are curious about? That you don't know. A lot of times, sometimes this anxiety, this fear of having uncomfortable conversations is the unknown,
Yeah.
right? But instead of looking at it as something to be afraid of or to avoid, it's like, what can I learn from this? Right. And leaving yourself open to learning, leaving your assumptions, your judgments, setting them to the side, for as long as you need to, and really coming into the conversation with a curiosity. I like to have these conversations direct and with compassion, right? So, no kind of beating around the bush, using words that make you feel empowered and feel curious about the other person, and so entering the conversation with that intention. I am here to learn. Um, Reserving any judgments, but knowing that you're going to walk away from that conversation, setting that intention that you're going to walk away from this conversation, having learned something. You may not even feel warm and fuzzy after the conversation, and that's okay. It doesn't even mean that you have one conversation and that's it. Sometimes it's a series of conversations that need to happen as well. But we really have to take our ego out of it, really take ourselves out of it, because communication, and especially having those difficult conversations, is how we're ever going to move the needle. Otherwise, that unknown, that uncertainty, that anxiety just stays trapped and nothing gets addressed, and it changes the dynamic, it changes the relationship, right? So if we're here to learn, and if you're
Yeah.
really here to pour into that relationship with this other person, with a group, these are the things that you have to do, to really equip yourself to get grounded and to get centered and set the right intention going in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like often when we enter situations that cause anxiety, we it's the cringe factor that some people feel like, okay, if I step in it, then that'll be cringy, and then I don't want to be cringe. That's ego related. The uh gosh, it was just on in the front of my head. What was it? Um, and we often fill the narrative when we're anxious
Yes.
with negative things.
Yes.
It's like, okay, if you're gonna believe in like some fantasy, why not pick like the nice spot to think? But we always think like, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm XYZ. I'm gonna go in there and not say, and we fill the narrative with all of more anxious thoughts and more
Yeah.
negativity. And that's like, so I
Yeah.
love the wonder and curiosity, because then you can be like, oh, maybe I'm feeling, you can catch yourself before you enter the situation and think,
Absolutely. It's okay. Allow yourself to be vulnerable.
yeah,
You
I
put the
don't have all the
pressure.
facts.
Yeah, you don't have to know everything,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, it's really taking yourself out, and it relieves so much pressure than that we put on ourselves. To your point, Pooja, of making up a story. Whose story is that? Why not
Indeed.
get the actual truth, or why not pick a version of that story that actually empowers you and actually helps you to set that intention to build that relationship?
Yes. If
Yeah.
it's authentic, I feel like you can't go wrong.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I think, the more that we embrace that we're not always going to get it right. It's like, "Ooh, okay." You don't have to
Yeah.
go in there having to know the answer. You don't have to go in there like, "I'm going to say this, and when they say that, I'm going to respond this way." Like,
We're not
no.
in court.
Hey, no. Thank you. You're not in court. You're not gearing up for battle.
Yeah.
Right? So take the pressure off,
Yeah.
show up, as a human, let yourself be vulnerable. You can go back to being, the other way after your conversation, but use this as a practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's really hard for most people, and that makes sense because it's not like we live in a society where we practice this all the time and that it's
Mhm.
encouraged to practice vulnerability. But the
Mhm.
more you practice, the better you get at it.
That's right.
Or maybe the less fearful you are of it. Yeah.
Right. At the very least. Yeah, this is all a practice. And I love that you just, use that word. It is a
Yeah.
practice of how we can continue to stretch ourselves, continue to grow, every single day. And I know that, this sounds cheesy sometimes, but it really is like every time, every day that you get up, it is a practice of who do I want to be today? Who was I yesterday? Am I okay with the way that person
Hmm.
is, becoming and who I'm becoming? If not,
Yes.
who would I like to be? How can I
Yes.
change? You're right. So this is that practice, and we get to practice and be in that practice usually for a lifetime. It's not just, we do the hard thing and then we, make a sandwich. It's really committing to that practice. And I think that, a lot of folks are avoiding the practice or ignoring the practice because it's safe and it's the status quo. And I get it and I understand, but sooner or later it's going to confront you, and really understanding that, this is an area where we can grow and that we need to grow and that we need to practice. The more you say yes to that is the sooner that you can move through that.
Yeah. And it's not like you have these conversations and you're like pouring concrete and it's solid and it's never going to change.
Sure.
Like these relationships, all relationships are so dynamic, even when they
That's
feel
right.
like at one extreme or the other.
That's right.
Um, when we were talking offline, you were talking about some really great actionable steps. And I know people are always wondering, okay, I understand the problem, but what do I do about it?
Mhm.
And the things you were saying about some concrete actionable steps, I thought was like A plus. So can you please share it with our audience because it's just really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tee me up again. Tell us the the question.
Okay, you had kind of like two like really punchy ways to go about it. So one was like check yourself before you wreck yourself. So like what can you do? Well, and then the other one was leveraging your privilege. And all of us have some sort of privilege. So like how do
Yeah.
we use it?
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, so listen, I mean, we are in a time where we're seeing, a dwindling or a rollback, let's just say, of DEI. We were talking about that before. The backlash that is happening. Companies that are rolling back, their DEI initiatives. DEI is dead. We're seeing it in the headlines, right? So there's a narrative being spun right now, right? And we really need to pay attention to that narrative. Obviously, as we're navigating the workspace that we're in, the workspace that we're maybe looking to get hired into, right? So really doing our due diligence so that we understand what are the values that this company is holding and do they align with mine. I think, with the conversation that's happening around diversity, equity, and inclusion right now, there are companies out there that are continuing to stand for what is right. So you really have to check yourself, like you mentioned, and really understand where do I stand on these issues? How important is this to me in a company? How can I make my decisions based on that? Studies are showing that when it comes to talent recruitment and hiring, job candidates are just as passionate and believe strongly about DEI and weigh that in their
Yeah.
decisions on whether to accept a job offer with a company as ever before. Okay, so companies it's in their best interest to continue to uphold these values and not just in a performative way, because we have those players out there too,
Yeah.
right? But to really understand, where do I stand on these issues and where does that rubber meet the road for me so that I can, make commitments to take action and to continue taking action, right? So first, check yourself, know where you stand, right? Then it's your privilege, right? We all have it. Access your privilege, know where you have power, where you have influence. If you have access to information, how can you use that information to help others? Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm always advocating for community care when it comes to our career, when it comes to our neighborhoods, our workplaces, and our families, right? So I'm in the professional development field. I've been in this field. There is, sort of this skew towards individuality or personal pursuit when it comes to, again, like checking the box, climbing that corporate ladder, right? But that's not what's going to get you. That's not what's going to get us moving forward. So
Yeah.
we really have to rely on each other right? To form that interdependence on each other. When you're, let's say, I don't know if you follow Joy Reid, who's a journalist on
Of
MSNBC,
course.
right? Of course,
Yes.
right? So look at the community that came for her, that supported
Yep.
her, that enriched her, right? When she was removed from MSNBC, we boycotted MSNBC. This is the same type of energy I want us to have in 2025 and beyond, right? So
Hmm.
if you know a sister who has just recently got laid off, there's layoffs happening across industries, right? How can you show up for her? How can you send her resources? How can you shout her out publicly and say, hey, y'all need to hire her, right? So what are the things that we can do as a community to rely on each other? Because we're seeing, the companies that are not supporting us or standing for us, right? We have to learn how to do it for each other. So what is your privilege? What's access to information? How can you open doors for someone else? And not only in times of crises, but in our everyday practice on how to be better communities, better stewards of community, right? So if you're thinking about someone like, hey, I wonder how so and so is doing, send her a note, even just a check-in text. I wrote about this the other day. Send her a check-in text
Yeah.
to see how she's doing. Check in on her. Ask her if she's drank enough water today. Is she getting enough rest? Because the answer to the question, how are you doing? I'm fine, is no longer
Yeah.
we're
Be
not
specific.
fine.
Drink water.
Yes, drink your water, stay hydrated. But it's okay when we're we're not fine. We're in a state in our country, in our society, that we're not fine. But we are all we have. We are each other's rocks. As in times of hardship and difficulty. And we really need each other now more than
Yeah.
ever. So I would say, to that is, again, what is your privilege? How can you use it? No matter how you identify, how can you use it to help and support others?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, I want to talk a little bit about your work. You wrote this book, and I want to show everybody. It's called, let me get rid of that. Um, it's called Dreaming on Purpose, a manifesto for Black women on taking the leap, building your dream, and being your own boss. I love, love, love it. Can you talk to us about it? And also the other things that you're working on and how we can access your knowledge and your services.
Yeah, so that is my book baby that was launched in the world last August, Dreaming on Purpose. It is my first book. It is available anywhere you can find books. So it's really about breaking free from the toxic work cultures and defining success on your terms, right? We talked earlier about pushing back on those boundaries, pushing back on systemic injustices that are no longer working for us. The workplace is not set up for us to thrive. So, how can we create environments and cultures and communities so that we can thrive? This is the new success flex, right? It's not about another certificate or another credential, although no shade to that. Absolutely keep learning, keep building yourself up, of course. But how can you redefine success on your own terms? So this book really walks you through different alternative career paths, work paths. It's really sort of a manifesto and a business leadership book loosely based on my experience from escaping toxic workplaces and finding a new way forward. So I write about that in the book. So if you ever feel stuck in your job or a job that is draining your soul, this is definitely something you're going to want to flip through the pages and really take note in. I talk about career liberation. I talk about workplace foolishness that happens and how we can all reclaim our time and our space. If you want real, like, sort of unfiltered career advice, I'm not gonna stick to this kind of traditional career advice that you might find in other publications, but I really want to give you real talk and unfiltered truth about how you can navigate your career. How do you set up better systems for yourself to take care of your mental health and your emotional health, and how do you navigate, to your point, the difficult conversations in the workplace and what that looks like. So that is where I like to, play in sort of my world and the work that I'm building. I'm really on this mission to have workplaces and work culture work better for us. right? Because
Yeah.
right now they are failing us. So my committed mission every single day is to work with individuals and to help them explore what does career liberation look like for them, and for brands and organizations who want to retain top talent and to engage with employees and workers that are going to be with you for the long haul and be loyal, and really really create healthy work cultures, right, that we can thrive in. And a lot of it is sort of dismantling what is not working so that we can rebuild better. So I'm really interested and passionate about building this new future of work.
I love that. Dreaming on purpose is also a great gift to give to friends and anybody who really needs it, even if it's not you. So go get your copy. I have
Right.
mine. Go get your copy today. Um, I want to ask you one last question before we have to end. Small act of equity that anyone listening could do today to make a difference.
Yeah, I love that question. We all have the tools and the capacity to advocate, for others and to demonstrate those small acts of equity. One thing that comes to mind for me is passing the mic. Right. So we're
Yes.
all in communication with each other every single day. We're in meetings, we're in interactions. You might experience an injustice, or you might experience where someone gets talked over repeatedly. Maybe that's something that you notice happens a lot in your workplace, right? Show up for them. Speak up on their behalf. There is power in numbers. I know that sometimes we're, maybe hesitant to, say anything, and it's a really scary place to be. But in that millisecond, you can decide, who do I want to be in this moment, and how can I be a better advocate for others, and for equity and justice in the workplace. So pass the mic, speak up. Look who is not in the room, whose voices are missing right now, or are silent or silenced, right? So how can you advocate on behalf of others? How can you start to challenge yourself to see whose voice is not being heard, who's in the room that needs to be, and how can I open the door for them?
Yeah.
So I would offer those tips as something that we can all do every single day, and they're very small, but they make the biggest impact.
Yeah. And people, it's not a big deal. People think like, "Oh, I don't wanna." No, it's you're not that, special or important. Just do it. Just do
Just
it.
do
It's really a small act. Um, you can find Ariane Hunter on her website, arianehunter.com. Connect with her, Instagram and LinkedIn, at
it.
Ariane Hunter, on both, platforms. Ariane, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was so
Buy the
fun.
book. Buy it.
Get
It's
the book.
awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm so happy we got a chance to talk. And I'll be with you back in 2 weeks. Looking forward to it then.
Sounds
Bye-bye.
good. Thank you, Pooja.